What if I told you that one of Hollywood's most composed young stars completely lost her cool in front of thousands of people, and the moment was so unexpected that even she couldn't explain it afterward? That's exactly what we're diving into today, and trust me, by the end of this video, you're going to see Jenna Ortega in a completely different light. Welcome back. If you're new here, this channel is all about pulling back the curtain on the moments that define celebrities beyond the carefully curated image they present to the world. And today's subject, Jenna Ortega, gives us one of the most fascinating case studies we've seen in a long time. Because here's the thing about Jenna. She has built her entire public persona around being unshakable, cool, calm, collected, the girl who walks red carpets like she owns them, and gives interviews that make journalists feel like they should be taking notes. She is, by almost every account, someone who has mastered the art of public presence at a genuinely remarkable age, which is exactly why what happened at this particular public event hit the internet like a thunderclap. Before we get into the details of the moment itself, we need to understand who Jenna Ortega actually is, because context matters here more than you might think. A lot of people know her from Wednesday on Netflix, that breakout role that turned her from a recognizable face into an absolute cultural phenomenon. The show dropped in late 2022, and the dance scene alone generated the kind of viral traction that most studios dream about. Suddenly everyone knew who Jenna Ortega was. Not just the kids who had followed her Disney and horror film career for years, but parents, grandparents, people who had never once thought about YA content were watching that show and specifically watching her. That kind of overnight cultural saturation is a lot to handle for anyone. But Jenna handled it with what appeared to be effortless grace. She gave interviews that were thoughtful and funny. She pushed back on questions she found reductive without being dismissive. She talked about her craft with a seriousness that made entertainment reporters sit up straighter. She was, in short, everything the Hollywood machine wants a rising star to be, but with enough edge and authenticity to make it feel real. She became the person everyone assumed was always prepared, always composed, always exactly where she wanted to be. And that assumption is precisely what made the public event we're talking about so genuinely stunning. Now here's where I want to slow down and set the scene properly, because the context of this event matters enormously to understanding why the reaction was so surprising. Public appearances for someone at Jenna's level of fame are not casual outings. They are orchestrated, prepared, rehearsed in ways that audiences never see. There are teams of people whose entire job is to make sure that everything goes smoothly, that the talent knows what to expect, that surprises are minimized. Every interview question goes through a vetting process. Every crowd interaction is managed. The whole apparatus of celebrity machinery exists specifically to prevent the kind of unscripted, genuine moments that audiences actually want to see. Which means when something breaks through all of that, when the real person cracks through the polished surface, it lands differently. It lands harder. People feel it in a way that no amount of carefully planned promotion can manufacture. This is part of why celebrity moments like this travel so fast online. It's not just that people are entertained, it's that they're genuinely surprised. There's an element of witnessing something that wasn't supposed to happen, and that feeling of being let into a secret, even briefly, is incredibly compelling. The parasocial relationship that fans build with celebrities runs on these moments. The slips, the genuine reactions, the times when the armor comes off. And Jenna Ortega, more than almost anyone her age in Hollywood, had built such a consistent and impenetrable version of her public self that when the armor actually came off, the contrast was almost jarring. Let's talk about what fans and observers have noted about Jenna's public behavior leading up to this moment. Across award season appearances, press tours and fan events, she consistently projected a very specific kind of energy. She was engaged but measured. She laughed, but it was a controlled laugh. She expressed opinions, but they were always calibrated opinions. People who have interviewed her professionally have noted that she is one of the most media-trained young stars in the industry, and that training shows in the best, and sometimes in the most interesting ways. Because media training at its core is about managing perception, and when someone is that good at managing perception, the moments when perception slips become disproportionately significant. So let's get to it. The event in question brought together a massive crowd of fans, press, and industry figures. The energy in the room was high, the way it always is when someone who has genuinely captured the cultural imagination shows up in person. There's a particular electricity that surrounds people who have become symbols of something larger than themselves. Jenna had become that. She was no longer just an actress promoting a project. She was an icon, at least in this particular moment, and she was being treated accordingly. The scale of the reception she received when she entered that space was extraordinary. And that's where something shifted. Because somewhere in the middle of all of that adulation, surrounded by thousands of people who were projecting their love and excitement and expectation onto her, something in Jenna Ortega cracked open in the most human way possible. What observers described and what multiple accounts captured was a moment of visible, overwhelming emotion. Not the elegant kind of emotion that gets deployed strategically on a talk show to build connection, but genuine, raw, slightly uncomfortable emotion. The kind that makes the person experiencing it look like they desperately wish they could press pause. Multiple people who were present described the same thing. A sudden shift in her composure. Eyes that went from that characteristic cool steadiness to something much more unguarded. A pause that lasted just a beat too long. The kind of pause that everyone in the room felt. Some people described it as her looking almost lost for a moment, which, given everything we know about how she typically presents publicly, was remarkable. Others said it looked like she was fighting something back, that there was visible internal effort happening in real time. And what was so striking to everyone who witnessed it was not just that the moment happened, but what appeared to trigger it. It wasn't a hostile question. It wasn't a technical failure or an awkward situation. By most accounts, it was something positive, an outpouring of genuine affection from the crowd, a moment where the sheer volume of people who had connected to her work and to her as a person became undeniably, viscerally real to her. She was confronted, in the most direct way imaginable, with the actual scale of what she had built, and something about that confrontation bypassed every layer of training, every habit of composure, and hit somewhere genuinely vulnerable. Now think about that for a second, because this is actually more psychologically interesting than any negative or scandalous moment would have been. We're wired as an audience to expect celebrities to crack under pressure, under criticism, under the weight of negative events. When someone breaks down crying because of a difficult question or a hostile crowd, we understand that intuitively. But when someone breaks down because of overwhelming love, because of the magnitude of connection they've created with people they've never met, that's something different. That's something that points to the enormous weight that fame actually carries, particularly for someone who became famous so young and so completely. Jenna Ortega has been working in this industry since she was a young child. She didn't stumble into celebrity from some other life. This is the only professional life she has known. And yet, or perhaps because of that, there's evidence that she has maintained a very careful internal separation between herself and the image she projects. This is actually a survival mechanism. Many child actors who navigate Hollywood without catastrophic personal consequence do so by developing exactly this kind of duality. You give the industry what it needs. You protect something for yourself. You stay functional by not letting the full weight of what you're doing and the scale of what it means to other people land too completely. But that strategy has its own costs and its own breaking points. And what this event appeared to expose was one of those breaking points. Not a failure of character or composure, but a moment where the carefully maintained distance between Jenna Ortega the actress and Jenna Ortega the person who has to live with all of this simply collapsed, and thousands of people got to witness it. The aftermath was fascinating to watch unfold, because the internet being what the internet is, the reaction was not monolithic. There were people who were moved by the moment, who talked about it in terms of authenticity and humanization, who said things like, "Finally, we're seeing the real her." There were people who overanalyzed it with the particular fervor that online fan communities bring to anything involving their favorite celebrity. And there were, inevitably, people who interpreted it through whatever lens they had already constructed for her. But the dominant narrative that emerged, the story that stuck, was one of genuine empathy. People seemed to collectively understand, at least intuitively, that they had witnessed something real, not a performance, not a calculated emotional moment designed to generate press, something that surprised even Jenna herself. And in a media landscape where almost everything is suspect, almost everything can be read as strategic, that quality of genuine surprise is enormously powerful. It cuts through the noise in a way that nothing manufactured can. What's worth examining here is what this moment reveals about the particular pressures that young women in Hollywood face at Jenna's level of visibility. There is an expectation placed on young female celebrities specifically to be simultaneously accessible and untouchable, to be the kind of person fans feel they know intimately while maintaining the kind of aspirational distance that makes them worth watching. It's a fundamentally contradictory expectation, and the people who seem to navigate it most successfully are often the ones who develop the most sophisticated internal architecture for managing it. Jenna Ortega is one of those people. Except that architecture, no matter how sophisticated, is built by a human being who started this work as a child and who has never had the luxury of building a fully private self before an intensely public one was constructed on top of her. The emotional weight of that is difficult to overstate. And it might be the key to understanding why this moment happened when it did, and in the way that it did, not as a crack in the armor but as the armor briefly becoming unnecessary, as the machinery stopping just long enough for the person underneath to breathe. There's also something to be said about what this moment did for Jenna's public image, though I suspect she cared very little about that in the moment itself. Celebrity narrative is a strange and often counterintuitive thing. In general, moments of visible vulnerability, particularly when they're clearly unplanned, tend to deepen audience connection rather than diminish it. We are drawn to people who show us something real, even when, maybe especially when, that real thing is uncomfortable or messy, or doesn't fit the image we've constructed for them. It's the reason why the most enduring celebrity relationships between fans and stars are almost never built on flawlessness. They're built on the moments that reveal the human underneath. Jenna Ortega losing her composure at a public event for however briefly it lasted gave millions of people a new way to see her. Not as the unshakable cool girl who seemed almost too composed to be relatable, but as someone who is carrying something significant, who is navigating something genuinely enormous, and who is doing it without a roadmap because almost no one her age has walked this exact path. The connection that moment generated was not sympathy exactly. It was recognition. And recognition is the most durable form of connection there is. Let's zoom out for a moment and think about what this says about celebrity culture more broadly, because I think the Jenna Ortega moment is actually a window into something bigger. We are living in a period of celebrity that is simultaneously more intimate and more alienating than at any point in history. Social media has created the illusion of access while actually just creating a new, more elaborate form of performance. We see more of celebrities than we ever have before and somehow feel further from the truth of who they are. The constant stream of content has made us more skeptical, more sophisticated, and paradoxically more hungry for genuine moments of unguarded humanity, which means that when someone like Jenna Ortega has a moment like this, its cultural impact is magnified enormously, not because it's especially dramatic or scandalous, but because it's real in a world that has trained us to doubt everything. The scarcity of genuine moments in the content economy makes each one incredibly valuable. It's almost paradoxical, but it makes complete sense when you understand the environment it's happening in. There's another dimension to this worth exploring, which is the specific kind of courage it takes to be seen in a moment of vulnerability when you are someone who has built your identity around not being vulnerable. Not reckless courage, not the performative bravery of someone who has prepared a vulnerable moment for maximum effect, but the involuntary courage of someone who simply has no choice but to be seen as they actually are in a particular moment. There's a difference, and audiences feel that difference even when they can't articulate it. Even the most cynical viewer, someone who has watched enough celebrity content to be deeply skeptical of every emotional display, responds differently to a moment that clearly wasn't planned. And I think this is part of what made the public conversation around this event so interesting. Even people who are generally inclined to read celebrity behavior through a promotional lens found themselves pausing, found themselves conceding, at least privately, that what they had witnessed didn't look like a strategy. It looked like a person. A young, enormously successful, genuinely talented person, being briefly undone by the sheer weight of what she has built and what has been built around her. There is one more layer to this that I find particularly compelling, and it has to do with where Jenna Ortega goes from here. Moments like this can function as turning points in a celebrity's public narrative, not always in dramatic ways. Sometimes it's subtle, but they shift something in how an audience relates to a person, and that shift tends to be durable. Jenna Ortega before this moment was fascinating and compelling but slightly unknowable. There was a glass quality to her public presence, beautiful and clear but ultimately a surface you couldn't get past. After this moment, the glass developed a crack. Not a damaging one, not the kind that weakens the structure, the kind that makes it possible to see through to what's actually inside. And what's inside, based on what this moment suggested, is someone who cares deeply, who is moved by connection, who carries the weight of her position with seriousness and feeling, someone who has not become cynical or detached despite every reason and opportunity to do so. That is a genuinely rare thing at the level of fame she occupies, and the moment that revealed it was not a strategically deployed interview anecdote. It was real. It happened in front of thousands of people and cameras, and it could not be managed or smoothed over after the fact. That's actually the most remarkable thing about it when you sit with it. In an industry where almost everything can be managed after the fact, where narrative teams and publicists and social media managers work constantly to shape perception, this moment resisted all of that. It was too real, too complete, too human to be retrofitted into a PR strategy. It existed outside the machine, and perhaps that's why it resonated so deeply and spread so widely. It was a reminder that underneath all the machinery of modern celebrity, there are still people. There is still emotion that exceeds calculation. There is still the occasional moment when a real person breaks through the performance, not because the performance failed, but because something true was bigger than the performance could contain. Jenna Ortega's moment at that public event is going to be one of those clips that gets referenced for a long time. Not because it was scandalous, not because it revealed something damaging, but because it was honest. And honesty, at the scale and velocity of modern celebrity culture, is genuinely shocking. Maybe more shocking than anything else she could have done. If this video made you think about celebrity culture differently, or if you just found the Jenna Ortega deep dive worth your time, I want to hear from you in the comments. What do you think the moment actually revealed about her? Do you think it changed how you see her? Drop your thoughts below, and let's have that conversation. And if you're not subscribed yet, honestly, this is the moment to fix that, because we do this kind of analysis every single week on people and moments that deserve more than just a surface-level read. Hit the subscribe button, ring the bell so you actually see when we post, and I'll see you in the next one.